Short version. On almost every file Patty Hajdu has ever held, health, homelessness, substance abuse, Indigenous services, employment, jobs, and families, Thunder Bay sits at or near the bottom of the Canadian League tables. It is the place that proves their portfolios are failing. I'll go topic by topic and rate Thunder Bay against other cities. So let's talk about Indigenous populations. Thunder Bay is the census metropolitan area CMA with the highest population of Indigenous people in Canada. About 12 to 14% of the population, far above Ontario's average at 3%. That means that every failure in health, housing, policing, or employment lands disproportionately on Indigenous people. And the rating for Indigenous proportionality and therefore exposure to federal mistakes is the worst case CMA in the country. As far as health expectancy, life expectancy, health, jobs, and families, in the Northwest LHIN region, Thunder Bay area, life expectancy is 2.9 years lower than the Ontario average, 78.6 versus 81.5. Ontario overall hasn't been that low since the mid-1990s. High quality reporting calls Northwestern Ontario's life expectancy the lowest in the province. On basic longevity and health outcomes, bottom of Ontario, among the worst in Canada's urban regions, exactly the opposite of what you'd want under a minister who once ran public health and now runs jobs and families. Homelessness and housing, employment, labor, Indigenous services, jobs, and family. So Thunder Bay's point in time, PIT, counts show entrenched homelessness. In 2021, 62.9% of the respondents in the city were chronically homeless, meaning long-term or repeated homelessness. The 2024 PIT report describes Thunder Bay as facing high unemployment, a severe shortage of affordable housing, and other structural barriers that exacerbate homelessness. A large hidden homeless population, couch surfing, precarious housing is explicitly noted as a major issue as well. On homelessness, chronic homelessness, and housing insecurity, one of the hardest hit urban centers in Canada, especially when adjusted for size, is Thunder Bay, where Patty Hajdu gets all of her experience. It's too funny. Substance use and overdose, health, Indigenous services, and harm reduction. So for Ontario, the overall opioid toxicity mortality rate in 2021 was 19.3 deaths per 100,000. Already more than doubled than 2017. Inside that, though, Thunder Bay is an extreme outlier. In 2024, there were 80 opioid toxicity deaths, a mortality rate of about 69.1 per 100,000, and it's the highest rate in the province. So yeah, let's put her in power. In overdose and drug mortality, Thunder Bay is effectively ground zero for Ontario and among the worst in Canada during the years Hajdu held health, then Indigenous services, then jobs and families. Smart move, guys. Crime, safety, policing, public safety, justice, neighbors. In 2018, Thunder Bay's overall police reported crime rate was 5,778 incidents per 100,000. A whole 40% higher than Ontario and 5% higher than Canada. Its violent crime rate was similarly elevated. By 2024, Thunder Bay's Crime Severity Index, CSI, reached 107.7, ranking 6th highest amongst Canadian CMAs, while the national CSI fell. Its violent CSI is more than double the national average. On violent crime and severity, top tier for the worst, for the wrong reasons, and consistently among Canada's most violent CMAs. Employment, poverty, jobs, and families. Thunder Bay's homelessness and PIT analysis highlight high unemployment and low incomes as structural drivers of homelessness and housing insecurity. Northern Ontario audit and social determinants work stress that residents of the North, including Thunder Bay, suffer worse health, lower life expectancy, and higher poverty than the provincial average, with about 17 to 18.5% identifying as Indigenous, again, far above Ontario's average. On the combined jobs and families portfolio, employment, income, child, family well-being, Thunder Bay is structurally disadvantaged and consistently underperforming, especially given its demographic burden. Overall verdict in her topic areas, okay, if you line this up against Patty Hadju's ministerial resumes, status of women and equality, city with high rates of violence and extreme vulnerability for Indigenous women and 2S LGBTQ plus people. Employment and labor, entrenched employment and WSIB-style injury benefit failures feeding into homelessness. Health, lowest regional life expectancy, highest opioid death rate in Ontario. Indigenous services, highest in urban Indigenous proportion in Canada, still facing severe health, housing, and safety gaps. Jobs and families, persistent poverty, high crime, high overdose, chronic homelessness. So if you had to reduce it to a report card for Thunder Bay on Patty Hajdu for the topics she has ministered, health outcomes, F. Substance use and overdose harm, F. Homelessness and housing security, F. Violent crime and safety, F. Indigenous equity and well-being, F. Employment, jobs, and family stability, D-. This is not all on one person, obviously, but for your Cabinet Accountability Project, this is fair on the public data to say Thunder Bay, the city that reflects Minister Hajdu's stated expertise and repeated portfolios, is consistently one of the worst performing urban areas in Canada on homelessness, overdose, violent crime, health, and Indigenous outcomes during her time in office. The applicant notes that the Honourable Patty Hajdu's elevation to multiple senior portfolios, employment and labour, health, Indigenous services, education, and now jobs and families cannot credibly be explained by positive outcomes in her home region. Thunder Bay, the most associated with Mr. Hajdu's pre-political career, consistently ranks amongst the worst Canadian urban centres on the very indicators her portfolios are meant to improve: homelessness, overdose deaths, violent crime, life expectancy, and Indigenous well-being. Rather than disqualifying her, this record appears to have enhanced her political usefulness to destroying this country. Okay? She's from the hardest hit city, so let's trust her. As hiring logic? No. 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 And to further this, on September 17th, 2018, the Prime Minister's office acknowledged Mr. O'Neill's plea regarding homelessness and debt and forwarded it to Minister Patty Hajdu, then Employment, Workforce Development and Labour, to apprise her of any programs that may be assistance. She failed. Given direct ministerial notice in November 2018, Minister Hajdu's unique portfolio sequence over precisely the files that determine Mr. O'Neill's survival, employment, labour, health, Indigenous services, jobs and family, and the notorious systemic failures in Thunder Bay on homelessness, overdose, violent crime, and Indigenous outcomes during the same period, the minister was under a heightened duty to ensure that federal programs and intergovernmental coordination did not arbitrarily deprive a disabled Indigenous applicant of security of the person, an equal benefit of the law. The response was a pragmatic form letter that pushed a disabled applicant deeper into default and homelessness, followed by years of non-intervention across her subsequent portfolios. That pattern is unreasonable, discriminatory in effect, Section 715 Charter, and contrary to the duty of fair, responsive, administrative under Section 18.1 Federal Courts Act. The court should set aside the non-decision, declare breach, and order remedial redetermination with safety-first criteria. This is prosecutorial lens, okay? I'm not arguing that she's unqualified because Thunder Bay is failing. Okay, what I am arguing is that her own city's outcomes made the lethal risk obvious, and my 2018 notices activated a duty to act. From there, every later portfolio she held compounded the omission. Okay? In corporate terms, no prudent employer would promote the face of a failing region to run the same failing files nationally unless optics trump outcomes. That supports my policy capture framing and strengthens the interference of recklessness once notice was on her desk.